Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 2022 horror anthology film Tales from the Other Side. Now, with this being an anthology, there are a number of directors involved here as we get 6 different stories as well as a little bit of a wraparound story as well. So there's a multitude of actors involved. The most notable that you may well recognise is Vernon Wells from Commando and Mad Max, things like that. So essentially, this is an anthology film, so you get the 6 stories that I mentioned. The wraparound story is essentially it's set on Halloween night. There are 3 children who are trick-or-treating, and they decide to knock on Scary Mary's door. Every town all over the world essentially has got, the scary person in that town, and here it is Scary Mary, and no one ever goes near Scary Mary's house, so they decide to go knock on the door because it's Halloween night. And this little old dear answers the door, lets them in, serves them treats and drinks, and starts telling them horror stories on Halloween night. And that's where we get these stories from. Now, the first story is one that's called Petrified Boy. And it is essentially, there is a yard sale taking place. There is a grandfather who has died, and they're selling off all his stuff in the yard for the neighbours and things like that. And apparently he used to be involved in a circus many years ago, and one of the attractions was something called the Petrified Boy that used to scare everybody up and down the country. And it's linked to that, basically. This woman starts telling the story of this Petrified Boy, and the children linked to this yard sale take it all in, and then guess what? It turns out to be not just a story at all. So a pretty... I don't want to say poor start to the anthology film, but it certainly wasn't. The production values weren't brilliant. There's quite a few child actors in this one that the acting's not brilliant, I suppose it's fair to say. So it really struggled, I think, to grab your attention, but it was a decent idea. It just necessarily wasn't executed particularly well. The second story was called Flicker, and it was amongst the best. There is this guy that turns up at a cemetery. This is a story with Vernon Wells in it. Vernon Wells plays like the mortician, I think he is. So this lad turns up at a cemetery for a job. And he is like a film editor and a filmmaker. And the job at this cemetery is for him to turn up on site during the night and then make videos of people who have recently died for their families to show when the funeral's taking place. So he edits them videos during the night and so on and so forth. And guess what? It's a cemetery. It's spooky. Spooky things happen. And I'm obviously not going to spoil it. But I actually thought this one was pretty good. It was reasonably effective. There was a decent, at least one decent effect in there. It did get a little bit under your skin. The third story was called Crystal Ball. And this young couple go to the fair. There is someone doing fortune telling, a creepy old gypsy. I'd like to say woman, but I wasn't sure if it was a woman or a guy, actually, and I think that was the point. And certainly the woman decides to be, adventurous, and she steals the crystal ball and runs off, and the boyfriend runs off with her. And then that kind of leads to, they certainly end up regretting that decision, I think it's fair to say. So again, a decent idea. The execution was tolerable, I suppose, but I don't think it was just as effective as it could have been again. Story 4 was called Either Or. And it was set in like a mental hospital, and there is one chap in particular who thinks he can hear the voice of God. Obviously the doctors don't believe him, and then something miraculous and strange happens. And then you've kind of, I don't want to spoil it if you like. So that's the scenario basically. It's like a set in a mental hospital. Again, I actually didn't mind this one too much. It was pretty watchable. I'm not exactly sure you could call it. Did it deserve to be in a horror anthology? It didn't feel very scary or horrific. To be honest, not many of them do in this horror anthology set. This one in particular, like I say, even though it was decently made and stuff, it wasn't what you would call scary. Story 5 was one called Blood Red. And this was a young artist who likes to use his own blood in his paintings, brings a woman home who turns out she's got an ulterior motive because she believes, it becomes apparent that, you know, his paintings will actually become very valuable after he passes on. So a plan is forged, shall I say. Again, nicely done, well lit, good idea, decent performances in this one, with a pretty decent end to it as well. Didn't mind this one at all. Now, story 6 was for me the worst of the bunch. It was called Krampus versus Elf, and it was like a weird puppet show crossed with stop motion. But my son's been doing stop motions for years. He's 16 now. He's been doing them since he was about 9, and they've been better quality than what we got here. It was really bad. It was this woman telling the bedtime story to her 2 kids, and it turns into this stop motion thing. It was not very good at all. It was only about 5 minutes long as well. It was very odd. Didn't belong. Didn't need to be in the film, I would suggest. And then it finishes with the wraparound story again with Scary Mary and these 3 kids that come to visit her. So, a pretty average anthology film, this. There weren't any that stood out as being particularly creepy or scary. There was the one in the cemetery and probably the blood red one, the one with the young artist, were probably the 2 highlights here. And apart from the last one, which was weird, the stop motion thing, all the others are certainly watchable, and none of them stand out as being horrifically bad. Just like I say, the stop motion one is just a little bit odd, I would suggest. So I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 10. It's right down the middle. It's bang average. And if the stories had been a bit better produced, a couple of them were quite low quality, I think it might have elevated it a little bit better. So that's my review for Tales from the Other Side. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. I'll be back with more reviews and content on the channel very, very soon.